Hello everyone, how's it going, and welcome to today's Wild Rift guide. In today's guide, we're going to be taking a deeper look at Akali. Akali is an AP assassin that can be played in either the mid lane or the solo lane. She's a pretty weak champion early on, so you do need to play safe most of the time during the laning phase, but this is until she reaches level 5, as her ultimate is her main damage source. As an assassin, Akali does really well at doing high burst damage. So in them team fights, you need to make sure you dive onto the enemy backline and you try and do as much damage as possible to the enemy carries. Taking a quick look at the build for Akali, you can see here that this is pretty much a standard full build for Akali. You don't really have a core item that you really want to go for first, like a Luden's Echo or a Rod of Ages or anything like that, because Akali doesn't have mana. So Akali doesn't really fall into the place of running out of mana, so you need to buy a mana item and things like that. So most of the time what you want to do is go for this sort of full build where it's more to do with damage. You have items like Lichbane that give you a lot of ability power and ability haste, and then using an ability cause the next attack within the next 10 seconds to do bonus magic damage as well. Now if you don't know from Akali's passive, which I'll explain in a second, every time you use the ability, most of the time you want to auto attack afterwards anyway because of her passive, but I'll explain a little bit about that later on. You got items like Death Cap to give you a lot of ability power, which is very useful, Void Staff for the magic penetration, Infinity Orb to be able to crit when enemies are low on health, and you also got Morellonomicon there for the anti-heal and also more magic penetration as well. As you can see, overall it's just all to do with damage. There's not really anything to do with, you know, Luden's Echo, Rod of Ages and things like that. You have seen a few people build like Rod of Ages Akali. You can go for it if you want to try it. It will make you a little bit more tanky as well, but I feel like it just delays your power spike just a little bit. Now, even though this is the full build for Akali, this is not really what you see people build on Akali. Most of the time you see people building components, a lot of components as well. One of the components is Prophet's Pendant. Gives you a little bit of maximum health early on, and also ability power, and it also gives you early magic penetration. So this is kind of a really cheap tier 2 item that you can go, which actually builds into items like Infinity Orb, like Morellonomicon as well. These two items that you can see on the right above Prophet's Pendant. So it's actually a component that you can build later on. So you normally see like Prophet's Pendant into Lichbane, into Death Cap, and into Void Staff, and then maybe after that you see Akali players think, you know, do I need the extra crit, so do I want to build Infinity Orb, or do I need anti-heal, so I'll go for you know, Morellonomicon instead, and they'll change that last item and then they'll build the other item last. So you see components like that. Sometimes you can even go completely overboard. You might even see people completely skipping. They might just do something like this. They might build like early early anti-heal if they need it, so the Oblivion Orb, they might build that as well. There's loads of tier 2 items that you can probably build on Akali, and you've probably seen builds like this as well, maybe in your ranked games, maybe in competitive as well. You've seen people sometimes building Haunting Guise as a component as well. So it is possible to just go for like components early on for Akali. As mentioned, you know, Akali's early game is not really too strong, so you need to kind of scale up and get into the late game as soon as possible, and you need to try and get that early lead. If you do get an early lead with Akali, you can be really strong. Looking through the runes, you got Conqueror as your main rune. Obviously you gain stacks of adaptive force, allows you to deal more damage, which is really nice. The only other rune I would kind of recommend if you are struggling a little bit with Akali is try and go for, if I find it, there you go, straight away, Fleet Footwork. Now, Fleet Footwork doesn't allow you to deal more damage or anything like that. It just allows you to heal a little bit more during the laning phase. I struggle a little bit with Akali during the laning phase. I tried Fleet Footwork a couple of times as well, and it does help you out a lot. You know, every so often you get that little bit of extra healing, the extra movement speed as well, which can be very helpful. But the only downside to it is that you will lose a lot of damage from Conqueror, because most of the time with Conqueror, when you dive in onto the backline with all the abilities, all the auto attacks that you'll be dealing as well with Akali, you can stack up Conqueror quite quickly. And other than that, there's not really any other rune you can go. You know, Electrocute doesn't really help you too much. But yeah, if you are struggling, I do recommend try Fleet Footwork, see if that will help you out during the laning phase. Other than that, you got Brutal as well for the extra AP damage, which helps Akali throughout all stages of the game. You got Adaptive Carapace, which gives you that little bit of health, and also when Akali drops below 50% health, you gain Armor or Magic Resist depending on the damage type you took in the last 60 seconds. And then you have Sweet Tooth as well for the extra honey fruit healing. And then for the spells, you have Flash and you have Barrier. Now, most of the time I would take Barrier on Akali just to play safe in the early game. If you do want to be aggressive, if you do feel really confident, you can go for Ignite as well. This gives you that early game damage pressure, and it gives you that early game sort of advantage over your opponent, especially if they have healing like Renekton or anyone like that as well, because obviously Ignite does the Grievous Wounds effect as well, which can be very helpful, and also can be helpful during team fights as well. If you don't get that Oblivion Orb early on, you do need a little bit of anti-heal against like AD carries, for example. You can use Ignite on them, and you can try and burst them down as well. So that's a little rundown of the Akali build. Like I said, the main purpose of the Akali build is build a lot of AP. Don't really focus on mana because you don't actually need mana at all. So kind of completely ignore the mana items. Just go for raw damage and more magic penetration, more crit damage, and just try and do as much damage as possible. Quickly as well for the boots, I nearly forgot to mention the boots. Most of the time you want to go defensive boots, either Mercury Treads or Praetor Steel Caps, and then most of the time you want to go for Zhonya's as well. You can go for Protobelt. This guy does give you another dash, but to be honest, Akali has like 20 million dashes anyway, so you don't really need to worry about Protobelt for another dash. Zhonya's is really good if you're in the back line. If you are going to get low on HP, you can use Zhonya's, and hopefully after that, your Shroud and your second ability will be up and available again, so you can start to maneuver around during team fights. But yeah, that's pretty much everything for the builds. Like I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail for the builds and everything. Now it's time to move on to the abilities. First up for Akali, let's take a look at her passive, which is Assassin's Mark. Dealing active ability damage to a champion, reveals a ring for a few seconds. Crossing a ring empowers Akali's next attack to gain 100 range and also gain bonus magic damage as well. So this is actually really important, especially during the laning phase and even during team fights as well. Just making sure that you always auto attack in between using abilities, which also works really well with the Lichbane passive as well, which is why I said they kind of work hand in hand. So when you use an ability, you can see that there's a ring around you, and when you step outside of the ring, you can see that Akali's dagger starts to spin. This is when you know that you have the extra range and you have the extra damage. So most of the time during the laning phase, you want to try and use your first ability to use it and then walk away out of the ring and then walk back to try and auto attack. You can also do it the other way as well. Say the enemy champion is moving away from you, you can just walk towards them, and eventually you'll get your passive, and this will work with other abilities as well. The third ability will instantly proc the passive as well. Your ultimate as well will instantly knock you out of the passive range. As you can see, every single time I use an ability, I go outside of the ring, so I make sure I get the passive damage as much as possible. It throws out 5 daggers dealing magic damage, and enemies struck at the maximum range are slowed by 50% for just under a second. Now you see when you use the ability, you see you've got the edge of the ability, which is right at the end of the circle, and then you have everything else. So when you use the ability right at the end, as you can see, I will try and aim it as far away as possible. That is when the enemies will be slowed. If you just use the ability just, you know, as close as range as possible, then there's not really much that you can do about it. So what you mainly want to do is try and hit the first ability at maximum range, especially during laner phase. It will allow you to get that slow so you can try and get the passive off as soon as possible. Now, another really important thing as well is that if you hit it right on the tip, right as at maximum range, you're actually going to be outside of your circle straight away, so you don't even need to move away. But as you can see here, if I use my first ability at complete maximum range, you can see that I'm outside the circle and I don't need to move straight away. Moving on to the second ability, we have Twilight Shroud, which creates a smoke cloud that expands over a few seconds and grants Akali maximum energy. Akali is invisible and gains movement speed inside the shroud, but when you attack and when you use abilities, you'll break the invisibility for just under a second. So if you use it, you can see that at the moment I have like 2 bars of energy. You can see there when I use it, you can see I now have 3 bars, which means I can use abilities and I can, you know, you basically use more abilities and have more energy available to me. So making sure that obviously when you're inside the shroud, you need to make sure that you know that it expands. So if you stand in the middle of the shroud the whole time, eventually you will be seen as, you know, visible in the end. So at the start, it starts off really small, and as you can see, it expands over time. So making sure you move abilities around the shroud is really important. So when you use an ability, you can just go back, use your passive and everything as well. And then as you can see, just under a second later, I'm back to being invisible. Moving on to the third ability, we have Shuriken Flip. You flip backwards and throw a shuriken dealing magic damage and marking a target for a few seconds. You can recast the ability before it times out, and it dashes to the marked target dealing more magic damage. As you can see, the second part does a lot more magic damage than the first part of the ability. So as you can see, the range here, you can see the The long part of the ability is the way that your dagger is going to go, and the short part of the ability, so the part behind me, is the part where Akali is going to dash. So as you can see, I will use this to the target dummy, for example, and I'll be able to throw the dagger out, and as you can see, Akali dashes backwards as well. I can reactivate the ability to go towards the target dummy. Now, sometimes this can be a little bit difficult. You need to make sure that you're not going into 5 people, for example, 5 enemy carries or anything like that on the enemy team when you're dashing forward. But you can actually use this ability to go over walls as well. So say, for example, there's a champion over the wall and I want to try and get to them, and I don't think I'll be able to hit them with my dagger part. You can actually use this the opposite way around and dash over walls with Akali. You probably saw it at the start with the beginning clip. You can use it over this wall as well to get over the dragon pit, and this will mean that you can use this to go for your ultimate instead. So you can dash towards the enemies, use your ultimate, and use other abilities after that as well, and then use your third ability and everything as well. Now, moving on to the final ability, the ultimate is perfect execution. You have 2 parts to this ability. You have the first dash, which dashes through the enemies dealing magic damage and can be cast again after a few seconds. And the second dash, it dashes into a target direction, dealing more magic damage based upon the enemy's missing health. So the second part of the ultimate, you want to make sure that you use it pretty much at the end like an execute. So the first part of the ability, you need to make sure that you use this on an enemy champion. You won't be able to use this freely or anything like that. So you need to make sure that the enemy champion is within range. So when you use the ability, as you can see, you can dash. And after a few seconds, you can use the second part, which allows you to dash freely. So the second part of the ability, you can use in any direction or any way you want to. So you can use the first part of the ability, try and do a lot of damage. And maybe if you need to escape, you could try and use the second part of the ability. Maybe use your E and your ultimate to try and get away to safety. So Akali has plenty of dashes available to try and get into team fights, but also to try and get out of team fights at the same time. Taking a quick look at the skill order for Akali, at level 1, you always want to go for your first ability. It's your main poke damage source in the early game and what allows you to easily proc your passive. You can even use your first ability to try and get minions early on as well, as I mentioned. Akali isn't the best in the early game. Going into level 2, you have 2 options, whether you want to play defensively or aggressively. Most of the time, I like to take the second ability, so I have that defensive sort of tool and I can go invisible just in case I get into danger. You can go for the third ability as well. This allows you to play more aggressive and trade more aggressively as well, or you can try and use the dash to safety. Obviously at level 3, you want to make sure you get your third ability. You have all abilities available. Then you want to make sure you level up your first ability first, making sure that this is the maximum rank. As I mentioned, the main damage source to farm minions, to poke and lane in the face, to easily proc your passive as well, as I explained earlier. And then after that, you want to go for your third ability, as this is your other damage source ability, and then you want to go for your second ability. As I mentioned, in the early game, Akali isn't the strongest, but when you're going into the late game and once you get a few levels under your belt and a few items, Akali can then jump into the back line and deal a lot of damage. Alright, on to the gameplay. Unfortunately, I don't have any audio or anything on this gameplay. Unfortunately, I've been having a few struggles recently in terms of audios and trying to record and things like that. I think I found a fix now, so hopefully for the next guide for Akshan, this won't be a problem. So I'll probably just play, some music or something in the background whilst we're watching this as well. But as mentioned already, let's quickly talk about Akali in the laning phase. Before, Akali used to be actually really, really strong in the laning phase, and then Riot hit Akali with a huge nerf, especially in the early game, because it was just too easy to trade. It was too easy to just go, back and forth, proc your passive, do a lot of damage. As you can see, unfortunately, in the bot side of the map, we unfortunately didn't get anything going. I'm pushing the lane here because I know that Camille is the top laner, and Camille actually started in the mid lane because Galio was roaming down to the jungle. You can see I'm going to put a ward here now to try and find Camille. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to land my my second ability, but Camille has a few levels because of the mid lane XP that she got. But obviously now my mid lane has a little bit of an advantage. So as you can see, the early laning phase is all about trying to trade with your first ability. It's not really the best situation to try and trade with a Camille, because obviously her passive gives her that little bit of a magic shield. And as you can see, with Akali, you do take a lot of damage early on, so you do need to be very, very careful. I've gone for the Shuriken Flip for the second ability this game, just because Camille has a dash available to her, and sometimes even if you use your Twilight Shroud, you can get stunned inside the Twilight Shroud. So getting that Shuriken Flip to be able to dash away from Camille is actually really, really nice, especially if she uses her first ability. But as you can see, I'm playing really passive here. I'm just using my first ability to try and farm as many minions as possible because I know that I can't really win against a Camille early on, because most of the time she'll trade, she'll get her healing from her second ability, she'll be able to proc her passive as well. As you can see there, she tried to go in. I traded a little bit here to make sure that I get a little bit of damage off, but as you can see, pretty much every single time, because of that magic shield, I'm going to lose every single trade against Camille, which is a little bit unfortunate. But I'm trying to trade as much as possible here, trying to deal as much damage as possible. As you can see, I'm just losing every single trade at the moment, and unfortunately here I have to go back because sometimes I have to just, you know, play really passive. I decide to stay here in the end, and this is where kind of a mistake comes in from Camille, but also shows you how difficult Akali is to tower dive as well. You can see Camille here is trying to use her ultimate. She's trying to use her tower dive technique as well. Unfortunately, she shouldn't get there. She has level 5, so she tries to use her ultimate as well. But unfortunately, for her, I was able to move away, and I was able to use all my abilities to play safe. Now, this kind of shows you how strong Twilight Shroud is. If I go back here and quickly show you again, you can see that she has level 5 available. She knows she has a level advantage because of all the minions, so she misses her third ability. As you can see, she landed her stun, but instantly I just use the Twilight Shroud to turn invisible. This means that she can't use her first ability, she can't use her true damage, and then after that she tried to go back in again, which I'm not really too sure why she tried to go back in afterwards, but she tried to go back in, but unfortunately for her, I was able to move away and get enough damage off in time. So a little bit of an interesting tower dive by the Camille, but in the end we were able to survive him. Kind of shows how slippery Akali can be sometimes. So as you can see here, I'm pushing a wave as quick as possible. I know there's another minion wave coming, even though I'm low. I can see that the jungler is down in bot lane, so I know that I won't have any sort of danger or anything. So I'm just using all my abilities to try and push the lane as quick as possible. You can see Camille is back there, but the lane should hopefully reset unless she maybe tries to freeze it as well. As you can see, for this game, I'm going for the Prophet's Pendant as the first item, and then going into the Sheen, going into Lichbane, as mentioned in the build. Most of the time, this is what you go for. You just go for the Prophet's Pendant for an early little bit of damage, but then after that, you just want to go for, you know, things like you know, the Lichbane, Death Cap, Void Staff, just getting more damage. But like I said, you don't really need like Ludens, you don't really need the Void Staff, so you're going to be getting a lot of damage early on as quick as possible. As you can see, Camille decided to actually freeze the lane in the end, so maybe it was a little bit of a misplay from me to try and push the lane, but hopefully I was able to push out the lane. You can see I'm trying to push out the lane as quick as possible to try and reset it and put it underneath the tower, like the wave underneath the tower, so it will hopefully reset. I'm trying to poke down Camille as much as possible as well. Obviously, I have the early gold lead now. I have the early advantage, so I can try and take trades as much as possible. The Rift Herald and everything is spawned as well. My whole team is on the bot side of the map. I saw Camille going back to base as well, so I thought I'd push out the top wave, because most likely Camille will be going down to the dragon at this point. So pushing the wave here, just denying Camille more experience, more gold as well, but unfortunately I'm going to be a little bit late to this dragon fight here. And as you can see, my team is fighting around the dragon. They don't really know that Camille is coming. As you can see on the mini map, Camille is on her way, and they probably win this team fight around the dragon if I remember correctly. Obviously I'm a little bit late. I can see all the low members, but yeah, it could be a misplay on my part as well. As you can see, Shyvana does take the dragon in the end and does ultimate over the wall. So it does work out very well. I try and go in on the Camille here. I use my ultimate and my third ability and try and get as much damage output as possible. And I was able to burst the Camille and also burst the Pantheon and also the Lucian after that as well. So again, using my passive to go around my daggers, using my ultimate as well to just try and get as much execution damage as possible as well. And this is a huge early game lead for me now. I'm going to go back and quickly show you that clip again to kind of explain to you, my sort of sequence in terms of using the ability. So first off, I use my ultimate here to make sure that I get my passive proc off straight away and I can dash towards the Camille as well. And then afterwards, as you can see, I use my third ability. Now, the reason I use my third ability is that I know that I've got the second part of my ultimate coming up and back up and available. So if I land my third ability, and if I land it, I can use that to go towards the Camille and then use the execution afterwards when I deal enough damage. As you can see, when I go in, I use my first ability, I auto attack, and then I use the execution damage because I know that the Camille is low enough that I can dash forward. And when I dash forward, as you can see, the Galio was low as well. It wasn't Pantheon, it's actually Galio that was low as well. I get the double kill, and then I flash, and I also get the triple kill. I probably didn't need to flash at the end there to kill Lucian, but we get a complete ace this early on in the game. And obviously, with Akali, if you can get an early gold lead with her, she can be be really, really strong. There is a bit of a, I guess you could say, dilemma with this. I'm not the best with Akali. This gameplay did take quite a while, to be fair. I did lose quite a games with Akali. Obviously, I'm not going to be perfect at every champion. As most of you know, I'm an AD carry main. But I feel like, obviously, coming over from PC League and, you know, knowing all these champions on a basic level, I can give you all kind of a basic understanding and basic knowledge of the champions as well. As I said, I'm doing like a whole A to Z guide because I want to give you all kind of a one-stop place to go in terms of guides, in terms of just basic breakdowns for champions as well. You can see this game I'm going for Mercury Treads. I've got Galio Torn. I've got the Camille as well, which obviously will be rooting me. Pantheon Stun as well. Senna root. So there's a lot of crowd control on the other team. This is why I've got Mercury Treads, even though they do quite a lot of AD damage. So here you can see I'm kind of, you know, I'm going to kind of play a little bit more confident now. I've got 4 kills. I've got my Lich Bane completed. I'm working towards that death camp now. As you can see, I'll try and land my third ability on the Senna. I think they must have had a ward in the bush. They're trying to push the mid lane at the moment, but as you can see, I've kind of left the top lane because the top lane wave wasn't that, you know, too much of a worry at the moment, and Orianna was taking the blue buff, I believe, or was in the top side of the jungle for some reason. So I was just defending mid wave, just making sure that they can't take the mid lane tower, and then after that, as you can see, I go up to the top wave as well. So this is kind of to do with rotations, and kind of one thing I wanted to talk about as well. Rotating around the map at the right point. This is to do with AD carries for mid laners, for junglers, everyone really. Obviously, minimap is one of the most important things in MOBAs and in Wild Rift. Obviously, making sure that you have a look at the minimap constantly throughout the whole game is one of the most important things, because you need to look at where the jungler is at all times, where the minion waves are at all times as well, where you can look to make plays, loads of things like that as well. Obviously, Shyvana is going to go for the Rift Tail, but unfortunately has to run away there. Might get caught out by the Galio as well. Not too sure if she dies here or not. She used the ultimate to jump away, which was really, really clever. And as you can see, I'm going to try and go onto the Camille here, and I'm going to try and distill this Rift Herald or try and do as much damage as possible. But I know that I've got the Pantheon and the Galio coming as well. You can see here, I use my dash away to get away from the Pantheon stun, which is really, really good. And unfortunately, I moved to I accidentally moved to the other side of the wall. Honestly, I could probably have carried on going forward and going towards the team fight to try and get more kills. But unfortunately, when I was moving, I accidentally moved to the other side of the wall instead of going over to the river and trying to kill Camille and Pantheon. So a little bit of a misplay there in terms of my movement, but it happens. But you can see that sometimes you can use the third ability to kind of not block the ability, but to kind of keep your distance. So like if a Pantheon stun comes in, if another, you know, stun or anything comes in as well, you can use your third ability to kind of counteract that. As you can see here, Pantheon tries to ultimate on me, tries to use his stun again. I use the Twilight Shard to turn invisible. I use the first part of my ultimate to get away from the Pantheon, but unfortunately I make a misplay here. Now I do survive, if I remember correctly, but I actually make a misplay here. I wonder if you lot are actually curious of what misplay I made here. Main purpose of that was to try and escape right at the end, but unfortunately I just tapped the ultimate, and the problem with just tapping abilities sometimes is it will always go towards like the closest target, for example. So let me go through my my kind of situation here. So I was pushing top wave because I saw the Rift Herald, so I was trying to get as much damage output as possible here onto the tower. I see the Pantheon ultimate, so I think to myself, okay, I need to get away from this Pantheon ultimate. Pantheon ultimate's not really the best. It's kind of, you know, too far away from me. So I use my third ability, and I use my part of dashing to be able to get over the wall. I know the Pantheon's going to stun me with the Protobell, so as soon as I see Pantheon using the Protobell, I use Twilight Shroud. This means that obviously when the stun goes off, Pantheon can't use any other abilities or can't see me, and now you can see my movement here. I'm actually moving to the kind of enemy side of Pantheon, so I can use the first part of my ultimate to dash through the Pantheon to be able to escape. So my main purpose is to escape. I know the Galio's coming, I know the Pantheon's there, I know Camille could be here as well. So as you can see, I use the first part of my ultimate to dash away. I use my other abilities as well, but here is where I make the crucial mistake. I should have used my ultimate towards where Shyvana is, like down here. Hopefully you can see, yeah, you can see my mouse a little bit. Hopefully, you know, down here, if you can see that. So down here, like towards the river and everything. But instead, I get into a position where I use my ultimate. And because I'm tap casting my ultimate, you can see I use it right here. I tap cast my ultimate. And because Pantheon and Galio are towards the enemy jungle, I dash towards the enemy jungle. So I'm like, shit, I kind of dashed in the wrong way. And then when I realized when I dashed as well, I was like, oh no, Camille's here as well. Camille actually flashes for some reason. I didn't actually realize that at the time. Camille flashes to probably try and kill me, not realizing that I ultimate in that direction, but I was able to escape with my flash and my third ability to dash over the wall. But yeah, sometimes obviously tapping your abilities is not always the best. Sometimes it's actually better to kind of manual cast the abilities to make sure that you can get the dash and get everything everything up and available. As you can see, 402 at the moment. We are in a pretty good position. Obviously, sometimes we're making, you know, little misplays here and there, but we're in a, you know, comfortable position now that I feel like I can definitely one-shot like a Lucian, for example, or the Senna. Obviously, that early triple kill early on did really, really good. We were able to take the dragon. We were also to be able to take the kill. You can see here, I'm pushing mid lane. I'm using my abilities to proc the Lich Bane passive so I can do more damage on the towers. It's another tip with Lich Bane as well, if you didn't know. I see Lucian here as well, so I use my third ability. And as you can see, the Lucian is completely dead. There's nothing that Lucian can do at all. Unfortunately, I get a little bit caught out here. I use my ultimate to get away to safety. I Zhonya's, and then I use my second dash to get away to safety. Another little gameplay to break down, which is quite nice. So I like to do these little breakdown parts. So I see the Camille here. If I remember correctly. Oh no, sorry, this is me pushing down the tower. So when I push down the tower, I see Camille. So I was like, okay, Camille's not really there. Camille's going to be a little bit of a problem. I move into the river because I know the rest of my team is over here in the river as well. When I move in, I see Lucian here. Now, my first thought with Lucian is that Lucian has a dash. So I need to make sure I land my third ability so I can actually get onto Lucian as soon as possible. So I use my third ability to dash. I go onto him again. Unfortunately, I should have really kept my third ability until Lucian dashed, but I had thought that maybe I could have done enough damage because I'm so far ahead. As you can see, I was able to use my third ability, auto attack, and Q straight afterwards, and he's just dead. He's just completely gone. I tried to trade again, but unfortunately, I went outside of the smoke screen, so they were able to see me. I used my first part of my ultimate to get away to safety, and my stasis, so I can't get attacked, and then by the time my stasis finishes, I can use my second part of my ultimate to get away to safety. But again, it's all about, you know, knowing when to dash in, knowing when to dash out, using your abilities and your passive very, very efficiently. As you can see, I'm going to move over to the top lane now, pick up the rest of the farm because nothing really is happening in the mid lane, and then we go over to the dragon after this, I believe, if I remember correctly. Oh no, the Shyvana just takes dragon and also kills the Pantheon as well. So we do get the dragon as well, which is really, really nice. You can see that I can now buy the death cap, so I'm going to go back to base, buy the death cap. I have a lot of gold under my belt. 5-0 right now with this Akali game. It's going a lot better than some of my other games on the stream. If you do watch my streams, you'll know that my Akali games were not really the best. It did take me a bit of time to get a decent Akali game that I can break down. I can kind of break down some of the combos and everything and some of the decision making, because Akali is not the easiest champion. I would say Akali is definitely one of the most difficult champions to play in Wild Rift. Just because of how squishy she is, especially in the early game, and that because she has so many dashes, sometimes you don't know when to use certain dashes at certain points as well. As you can see, we see the Pantheon here. I might try and use my third ability. As you can see, trying to manual aim it to try and maybe get a dash off on a champion, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. So at this point of the game, in the mid game, you can see that I'm just in the mid lane. I'm trying to get that mid lane priority. We can maybe look towards to go for this second Rift Herald. You see we have a pretty good early lead. I know the Galio is in that bush and my Braum gets caught, so I move over so then Braum can dash away. Really, really good ultimate and a shockwave by the Senna. And as you can see, I'm using my third ability to dash towards Pantheon so I can use my ultimate to get onto it. This is sort of the combo that I was talking about. But unfortunately, I make another mistake. That was complete int. And yeah, we all die for it, which is kind of my fault, to be fair. Shyvana was kind of like roaming around. I'm not really too sure what she was doing. She had ultimate up and available. I was kind of tilted because of my own mistakes, so I started pinging Shyvana. But yeah, a little bit of a mistake. But as you can see here, the main thing about this this whole play is that I know that Pantheon here is completely out of E range, so I can't use the dagger to try and dash towards the Pantheon. So I use it the opposite way around, so I dash towards the Pantheon, which means I can use the first part of my ultimate, and then I'm able to, you know, kill off the Pantheon with my first ability. The problem is that I use the second ability to jump in, but there's no follow-up at all. Obviously, Shyvana is in the mid lane. I should have realized that. That was my own mistake for not looking at the mini-map. But yeah, I used the second part of my ultimate, and I didn't have my shroud or anything available. So yeah, a little bit of a misplay by myself, but hopefully you can learn a thing as well. Like sometimes using your second part of your ultimate aggressively is sometimes a bit of a problem. As you can see here, Shyvana is going to go over to the Rift Herald, or I was going to try and push down this bot wave, making sure that she doesn't die or anything. Unfortunately, she does die to Lucian. I think Lucian died. No, Lucian doesn't die in the end. So unfortunately, she does die in the duo lane. Yeah, a little bit of a misplay from us, but like I said, hopefully you can learn a thing or two as well, because like I said, sometimes I need to show you mistakes to kind of teach you all that, you know, sometimes dashing forward is not always the best play. It's not always the sort of play, especially if you're far ahead with Akali as well. Obviously, I gave the shutdown over as well, which is not really good. I was going for a clean game this game, but I was like, okay, I'm not going for a clean game anymore. I'm not able to get it in the end, unfortunately. But still, 6-1-2 is a pretty decent scoreline. See that my misfortune gets caught, and straight away I'm jumping onto the center. I know center's a squishy target. I use my flash to get my third ability off, and I'm able to get it again. I feel like I could have done this combo a lot better, and looking back at it, I feel like I definitely could have. I maybe didn't need to go that aggressive for Senna, and also I didn't need to dash back onto Lucian afterwards. But in the end, the whole of my team wins a team fight, and we are completely fine. But yeah, going back to that, I'm not going to rewind again because I don't want this video to be too long. Going back, obviously, I ultimate straight onto the Senna because I know that Senna's a squishy target and she can heal a lot, so making sure you jump onto squishy targets, as mentioned before, is really, really important. I flash to use my third ability so I can dash onto Senna. I could use my third ability maybe the other way around as well, but kind of, again, it's the same situation. My second part of my ultimate I used to dash towards Lucian instead of dashing away. I should have probably dashed away and just taken the kill that I got from Senna, but again, some other interesting combos there. You can see you can flash E and things like that as well, which is really, really nice. Yeah, at this stage of the game, we're in a pretty decent spot. 21 kills to 17, 7 kills to 2 for us as well. We're going for the Void stuff as well. I probably should have bought anti-heal a little bit earlier this game, especially because they have the likes of Senna, Pantheon, Camille might be building a little bit healing. Lucian as well probably has Hunter Vampirism, so I think that's a little bit of misplay in terms of the build. So making sure there that you know what you're doing in terms of the build. Obviously, if the enemy champion stuff does have healing, if they had, well, you know, any sort of healing at all, you want to try and get Oblivion Orb as soon as possible. And as you can see, they were able to win the team fight at Dragon, and they were able to surrender. So a pretty clean game overall for Akali. As I mentioned, you know, it did take me a lot of time to get this Akali gameplay for you all, but hopefully you all enjoyed this Akali guide. Again, any questions or anything, let me know down in the comments. If you have any suggestions or anything for Akali as well, or anything that you feel like I could have done differently, then let me know. Obviously, we're all learning as well every single day. You can see the damage output. Orianna is still completely disgusting. We did do a little bit of damage, not too much. Obviously, sometimes I did dive a little bit too far forward, and I did die for it, unfortunately. My 2 deaths definitely could have been prevented for sure. I definitely could have gone completely clean this game, and I could have gone had 0 deaths. But in the end, we were able to take the victory and get a few nice little plays for Akali as well. So hopefully you enjoyed. As always, take care, and I'll see you all very soon for the next Wild Rift guide. Take care.